Standing by the hospital bed, I watched my wife, Christen, cradle the newborn in her arms. Her face was a potent mix of exhaustion and euphoria, fueled by the adrenaline of childbirth. She wore a soft smile of relief, fragile yet proud, as the baby squirmed in a pale pink blanket. Across from her stood her mother, Dolores, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a formidable presence. On Kristen's other side was my mother, Linda, smaller and just as tense, her gaze flicking from Kristen to me more times than I could count. Though we were all gathered in that bright, sterile room, we might as well have been planets orbiting separate suns. I could feel my mother's constant stare on my back, sense Dolores's suspicion, and I felt as if Kristen herself was trying to send me a silent plea. Asterisk, please, just sign the papers. A nurse in pastel scrubs entered, holding the standard hospital clipboard, her expression professionally neutral. Mr. Davis? She addressed me with mechanical politeness. I need you to fill out the birth certificate form right away. The entire room seemed to hold its breath when I didn't immediately reach for the pen. Instead, I leaned back slightly, away from the bed, and crossed my arms over my chest. I'd rather wait, I said, my tone crisp. We'll fill it out after the DNA test. Kristen's head snapped up, as if pulled by an invisible string. What? The word was barely a whisper, her face twisting in shock. Her eyes looked huge in the fluorescent light. Martin, have you lost your mind? The baby is right here, in my arms. Why would you talk about a DNA test on the day she's born? I shrugged, feigning indifference. Because, I replied, I have reason to suspect things may not be what they seem. I gave her a simple, cold look, one I'd perfected over sleepless nights as my suspicions grew. If that little girl isn't mine, I'm not signing anything. Dolores sucked in a sharp breath and lunged forward, her eyes flashing with immediate rage. How dare you? She jabbed an accusing finger at me, her voice a low growl, forced down so as not to startle the baby. My daughter just gave birth. Are you seriously doing this now? My mother, Linda, rushed to place a calming hand on Dolores's arm, but Dolores violently shook it off. Don't you try to silence me, Dolores snarled, turning that fierce glare on Linda. You know damn well your son is out of line. This is no way to treat a woman who's just been through labor. My mother tried again, cautiously stepping between Dolores and me. Her own eyes were filled with anger, but it was tempered by something that looked like heartbreak. Martin, she said in a commanding whisper, please, let's not do this here. Not in front of Kristen. Not in front of the baby. I gave a short, dismissive laugh and raised a hand. She's known my position on this for months, I lied, though it was partly true. Kristen had at least suspected my doubts. And I'm sorry if the timing is inconvenient for all of you, but I need absolute certainty that I'm the father before I legally commit to a child. The nurse glanced nervously around the room, murmured, I'll come back later, and quietly backed out, leaving the birth certificate papers neatly on a small rolling table. Kristen's face contorted, shifting from shock to a slow, simmering, desperate anger. You sick bastard, she said, her eyes welling with tears. You're punishing me for no reason. Do you really think I cheated on you? I don't just think it, I replied, my voice flat. I know it. I was braced for an explosion. But it was Dolores who moved first. So enraged, she looked ready to strike me. Don't you talk to her like that. Don't you ever accuse my daughter of something so disgusting. Mom, please, Christen interjected, clutching the baby closer. He's lost his mind. He's always at work. He's got this stupid idea that I cheated. Because you did, I cut in, my voice carrying a deadly calm. I watched my wife's face. She froze, blinking as if I'd slapped her. Linda tried to intervene again, a plea in her voice. Martin, please, say you're joking. Don't do this. The baby is right here. This moment is precious. You can't destroy it. But Dolores's voice shattered the attempt. He's acting like a piece of trash, Linda. How can you let your son get away with this kind of nonsense? Linda's face nearly crumbled, but she turned to me with an edge in her voice. Son, I know you're upset about some suspicions, but can't you see how wrong it is to do this here? At least do it later. That, as if a curtain had fallen, I dropped the bomb I'd been holding. I put a camera in her car, I said, my tone hard, remorseless. Our dash cam. Then I installed spyware. I recorded everything you said, Christen. The color drained from Kristen's face. Dolores stared from her daughter to me, stunned into silence. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. The tension in the room was a physical weight as I tapped the screen a few times. Listen to this, I said, my voice sounding detached from my own body. I wanted them to hear her words. This is from 3 weeks ago, in her car. I selected a file, and the audio began to play. It crackled for a moment, and then Kristen's voice came through, hissing with contempt. That loser is always at work. He won't notice a thing. I'll get him to sign the certificate. And when I divorce him, he'll be paying child support. But when the baby's older, I'll tell her the truth anyway. Her voice continued in that same acidic, mocking tone, detailing how I was nothing more than a convenient wallet. Christen nearly dropped the baby, so shocked that the infant whimpered in protest. Dolores let out an audible gasp, clapping both hands to her mouth. Linda looked torn between horror and grief. Then, without warning, Dolores rushed me. She snatched the phone from my hand and with a sharp, violent motion, threw it to the floor. The device shattered with a loud crack against the hospital tile. You venomous snake, spying on my daughter. Only then did Linda physically step in, spreading her arms, trying to keep us apart. Stop it. Everyone, just calm down. But Dolores turned all her rage on her daughter. Did you really say those things? She demanded of Christen. What is this? This is monstrous, manipulative, vile. Christen was trembling, tears streaming from her eyes, her voice rising in panic. Mom, it's not like that. Shut up. Dolores's voice was filled with enough venom to paralyze the room. I defended you. I nearly attacked Martin, only to hear you admit on a recording that you planned to saddle him with another man's child for money. I took the opening to speak, my voice laced with quiet bitterness. She's been sleeping with that man, Marshall Jones, for months, maybe longer. She told me it was over, but well, you heard her. She couldn't even keep the truth from her own mouth. Linda exhaled sharply, pressing trembling fingers to her lips. Oh God, she whispered, looking at Christen. Christen, tell me that was some twisted joke, please. Christen just sobbed, rocking the now fussy baby. Dolores turned back to me, her eyes blazing. Fine, you have a recording. So what, Martin? You came in here like the devil himself, waving your audio proof, humiliating my daughter right after she gave birth. Yes, I said simply. Because either I'm the baby's father or I'm not. And I won't sign until I know for sure. Dolores's frustration with me hadn't faded, though her shock at Kristen's words was plain. She stepped forward, pointing a finger in my face. Sign it, she demanded vehemently. Sign that certificate now. Don't you dare abandon my little girl. I shook my head, stepping back, ignoring the swirl of guilt that would have threatened any normal father in such a moment. I'm not abandoning a child that isn't mine, I spat. If the results come back and she's mine, then fine. If not, no. Consumed by fury, Dolores lunged as if to snatch the pen from the table and force it into my hand. Linda cried out, grabbing Dolores before the woman could make a full-blown scene. Dolores was beyond reason. "Sign it, you bastard!" she nearly screamed, tears of rage in her eyes, her voice echoing off the hospital walls. "You do it, or I swear I'll—" "That's enough!" The door flew open, and two nurses stood there, their eyes wide with alarm. One of them stepped inside, her voice trembling with a schoolteacher's authority. "Stop shouting! This is a hospital!" Dolores spun around, took one look, and realized the scene she was causing. Aware of the precarious situation we were all in, she let out a ragged, defeated groan. She backed away, tears carving trails down her flushed cheeks. But her rage wasn't gone. It was only simmering. In the bed, Christen was openly weeping, holding the baby to her as if the child were the only life raft in a raging sea. I caught her gaze on me, a mixture of anger and desperation, but I just stared back, impassive. If she'd harbored any illusions that I would back down, the audio recording had ended them. Linda finally found her voice. "All of you," she said, swallowing hard, "let's step out of this room." "Wait," I said, my words sharp as the nurse hovered uncertainly. I narrowed my eyes at Christen. "You told Marshall I'd be paying child support, right?" I said, referencing the tape. "Well, guess what? You'll have to track him down for that." She stared at me, her eyes wet with tears. Then, in a raw, trembling voice, she spat, "Why are you doing this? You're being cruel. You're torturing a new mother." "Cruel?" I repeated softly. "Sure, but I learned from you, darling." Dolores made another move toward me, but Linda grabbed her elbow, physically steering her toward the door. The second nurse began speaking in low tones, giving Christen instructions on postpartum care while shooting me a glare that spoke volumes of her disapproval. I turned and walked out. My mother followed, torn as always, even into the hallway, where Dolores's accusations never stopped. She hissed words I'll never forget. "You piece of filth, Martin Davis. I'll kill you if you abandon that baby. I don't care what any test says." I met her gaze. "You try it," I replied. "That child isn't mine if science says otherwise." Later that night, I sat at home with a single lamp lighting the living room. The weight of the day's events was still heavy, but I wasn't going to yield to anyone's demands, and certainly not to Christen's manipulative ones. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. I let it ring twice before answering. "Son?" she began, her voice soft. I sighed. "Mom, I'm with Dolores and Christen now," she said quietly. "The baby's asleep, and Christen, she's inconsolable. Dolores is worried about her mental state. She just gave birth, Martin." I scoffed. "You think I care? After hearing that recording? She was doing just fine manipulating me into signing a certificate so she could bleed me dry once she filed for divorce." There was a silence. I could hear my mother's shaky sigh. "I know what you heard. But Martin, postpartum is no joke. You have to consider a woman's hormones are completely out of whack." "Stop," I said, letting anger seep into my voice. "Don't try to make me the villain for finally standing up for myself after she lied and cheated. I didn't give her any trouble during the pregnancy, because I wanted the baby to be born healthy. If the baby is mine, I will help. But if she's not, this charade is over. Another long silence stretched between us. So what do I tell them? She finally asked. What should I tell them? She asked, her voice almost a plea. Tell them to expect divorce papers soon, I answered firmly. I'm sure Christine's mother will be thrilled to have her back. I was done. A heavy, awkward silence settled between us before she hung up, leaving me alone in the quiet darkness. The following week was a storm of accusations and pleas. Dolores tried to show up at my house twice. My mother called daily, sometimes in tears, sometimes furious, but I ignored them all. I had a good lawyer, and he filed the papers quickly on the grounds of adultery. Meanwhile, Christine remained in the hospital for postpartum observation. The baby was small, but healthy, they said, requiring standard newborn monitoring. The perfect window for a paternity test. My lawyer and I made sure the court saw we were doing everything by the book. Then the day came. The DNA results. I opened the envelope, my breath catching in my throat, even though logically, I already knew. The test read, probability of paternity, 0%. It was right there, on official letterhead, with lines of genetic markers. The child was not mine. Did I feel a wave of relief? Not exactly. More like a cold, empty confirmation. A final, chilling click, as everything I had suspected fell into place. I scanned the rest of the documents, checking for errors, but there it was, in black and white. I got in my car, started the engine, and made the short drive to Dolores's house. She had insisted on bringing Christine and the baby there after they were discharged, and a twisted part of me wanted to see the look on her face when I delivered the final truth. The front door opened before I could even knock. Dolores, pale and tired, but as defiant as ever, met me on the porch. You've got a lot of nerve setting foot on my property, she practically growled, blocking my way. I let the silence hang for a moment. The child isn't mine, I told her, holding up the paper, so you can stop screaming at me to sign anything. A flicker of something, maybe grief, crossed her eyes. You're lying. I exhaled sharply, pushing the page toward her. Read it. She snatched the paper from my hand. The lines of text must have screamed at her, because her expression turned to stone. I saw her shoulders slump in pure despair. Slowly, she stepped back, letting me inside. Christine, she called out, get in here, now. The baby was nowhere in sight, likely asleep somewhere, but Christine appeared in the dimly lit hallway. She wore the same exhausted expression I'd last seen in the hospital, only now it was tinged with misery. Tears clung to her lashes. What? She asked dully, clearly expecting another confrontation. Dolores held out the paper, and Christine took it. As her eyes traced the lines that spelled out our genetic incompatibility, her breath hitched. I saw her sway on her feet, but she grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. Then she looked at me, trembling, raw grief filling her expression. It can't be, she whispered. They must have made a mistake. No, I said, my voice soft but final. No mistake. You and Marshall made a baby. He's the father. Christine's lips trembled as fresh tears welled in her eyes. Martin, I swear I love you, she pleaded. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this. You said some pretty explicit things on that recording, I reminded her. Things someone who loved me would never even think. She broke into sobs, But Dolores turned on me sharply. So now what, Martin? She demanded, defiant despite her sorrow. Now that you have your proof, you're just going to abandon her and the baby. I felt my jaw tighten. Yes, I said, without flinching. Exactly that. I want a divorce, and I want nothing to do with that child. Dolores's anger flared, but there was desperation in her eyes, too. She needs you, she practically shrieked. You can't just disappear. It's a baby, you heartless monster. After what your daughter did? I spat, a slight smirk playing on my lips. After she planned to have me pay child support for 18 years for a child that isn't mine. I shook my head, a dark knot twisting in my gut. I may be cruel, but your daughter taught me everything I know about cruelty. Christine's voice emerged, weak and trembling. Please, Martin. She reached a hand toward me, but I stepped back, ignoring the broken sob that followed. I turned for the door. For a split second, guilt threatened to paralyze me. Yes, the baby was innocent, but so was I. It's over, I said finally. Don't contact me again. And I walked out. During the divorce proceedings, the judge glared at me over her glasses, as if I were the worst man on earth. Mr. Davis, she said, your wife has indicated she wishes to reconcile. Across the aisle, Christine sat weeping, wringing her hands. Dolores hovered protectively, while my own mother sat apart from them, her eyes fixed on the courtroom carpet. I faced the judge. There is nothing to reconcile, Your Honor, I stated flatly. We have proof of adultery, a child that is not mine. As far as I'm concerned, this marriage is over. Christine tried to speak, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I made mistakes, but I love him. I felt a cynical smile stretch my lips. She's sorry she got caught, I said, and she loves the comfort I provided, not me. Her lawyer tried to object. Your Honor, Mr. Davis is mischaracterizing, but my own lawyer, a sharp man named Rayless, interjected smoothly. Your Honor, this is a clear-cut case of paternity fraud. My client should not be held financially or emotionally responsible for a child that is not his. The judge frowned. What about spousal support? She asked, flipping through the file. Mrs. Davis is currently unemployed, with no means to support herself or her child. I wanted to laugh. She can get a job, I said, and the child's father should step up, if he's even around. On that, Christine let out a heart-wrenching sob. He left me. Marshall was gone. The judge's gaze settled on me. Be that as it may, mister, you were married for 3 years. Standard procedure might require alimony. My lawyer cleared his throat, his tone polite but firm. Your Honor, we are filing for a fault-based divorce. Mrs. Davis's actions led to the irretrievable breakdown of this marriage. Even spousal support can be contested on these grounds. The judge shook her head, visibly displeased. She tapped her gavel lightly. We'll take a lunch recess. Court is adjourned until 1 o'clock. Out in the hall, I found myself near a bench. Christine approached me, tears still streaming down her face. She put a hand on my arm. I messed up, she tried to say in a low voice. We can fix this. No, I said, the single word laced with finality. Dolores joined us, her eyes narrowing. Stop it, Martin, for God's sake. She's postpartum, depressed, suicidal. She told me she wants to end it all. You're pushing her over the edge. I stared at Dolores, feeling a flicker of unease but hardening my expression. She pushed herself, I replied. She's suicidal. I suggest she get professional help. I'm tired of being her emotional punching bag, Dolores hissed. You're a monster. I squirm, turned away, letting the label slide off me. Somewhere behind me, I heard my mother's soft, shaky breath, but I didn't look back. When the divorce was finalized, it was no surprise. The judge reluctantly declared the marriage dissolved. No child to settle, no custody to end. Christine chose to live full-time with Dolores, carrying the weight of a heartbreak she had co-authored. I thought that was the last I'd ever have to deal with her. I was wrong. Months turned into years. I sold my house and moved to a different neighborhood, trying to sever every possible tie. I had no illusions that my mother would remain close with Dolores. They had been childhood friends after all. But I kept my distance from all of them. Then one day, about 3 years later, I got a call from Dolores. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a strange premonition made me answer. What? I asked, annoyance coloring my voice. I need you to come to my house, she said firmly, ignoring my hostility. Why would I ever do that? I started to protest, but she cut me off. It's not about Christine, Dolores said. Just come. Your mother is here too. That's all you need to know. Against my better judgment, I found myself driving to Dolores's residence. Old resentments churned in my stomach. I rubbed my temples, trying to soothe the headache that came with diving right back into this drama. When I arrived, I saw my mother's car parked in the driveway. I sighed, bracing myself, and walked to the door. Inside, the living room was dimly lit. Dolores stood by the window, and my mother, Linda, sat on a small sofa, her arms crossed. Just then, a little boy peeked out from behind the sofa. He was maybe 3, almost 4. He looked at me with wide, curious eyes, stepped forward, and asked, with the simple bluntness of a child, "Who are you?" I blinked. The boy had shaggy brown hair, slightly curly at the ends. A chill ran through me as I spoke. I'm Martin. The boy nodded sagely, as if I'd just announced my name was Santa Claus. I'm Tim, he declared, before scampering away. Dolores's lips stretched into a fond sort of smile. Timothy, he's a good kid. I couldn't help but ask, is he Christine's? Dolores confirmed it. Yes. A dull ache began to throb behind my eyes. I had never wanted to see this child. She had a girl, didn't she? I realized I might have never gotten the full story. Maybe there had been a second pregnancy. But I said nothing, waiting. My mother exhaled. Martin, she said softly, come sit down, please. I remained standing. Why did you call me here? Did you just want to show me your grandson? I asked bitterly. Dolores's face was drawn, more solemn than I'd ever seen it. Christine is no longer with us, she stated, her voice low. I felt a cold lurch in my stomach. Meaning, she's dead? Dolores nodded. It was an accident in Florida, with an alligator. Her words were hesitant, strangely stressed. My mother, Linda, rose from the sofa, taking a step toward me. She's gone, Martin. It's final. I just stood there, unsure how to process what I was feeling. Relief? Shock? Emptiness? A swirl of conflicting emotions left me speechless. But then, Dolores fixed her gaze on me, unwavering. She was spiraling, she said. And I won't lie to you, Martin. It wasn't an accident. My eyes shot up, alarmed. What are you talking about? Dolores maintained a carefully neutral tone. I ended it. I took her down by the water. She thought we were tourists watching the wildlife. I gave her a push, left her for the gators. A tiny, grim smile flickered on her lips. She'd become too much of a burden, poisoning Tim's mind, dredging up all the hate for you. It was time to make sure she didn't ruin that boy. My mother's voice was disturbingly calm as she stepped forward. I was there too, my jaw nearly unhinged. Mom, are you insane? She shook her head. We protected the child, Martin. That's what matters. Her face was stone, revealing no trace of regret. She was going to poison his mind against you. We couldn't allow that, Dolores continued, her tone as clinical as a surgeon explaining a necessary operation. Marshall Jones is also dead. He died in a car accident. An accident we arranged. We had to eliminate the threats. Tim is innocent. He deserves stability. I stood speechless, my heart seizing in my chest, my mind reeling from her confession. They were coldly admitting to murder, multiple murders, and had orchestrated it all so that Tim would remain safely in Dolores's care. I finally found my voice, which trembled with a mix of horror and disbelief. Why are you telling me all of this? Dolores looked me straight in the eye. Because I'm dying, Martin, she said. Stage 4 cancer. Your mother has it too. At that, Linda stepped forward, tears threatening to spill, but never falling. We don't have long, she whispered. Our greatest concern is Tim. Dolores gently took my wrist. You're the only one left to raise him, she said, sincerity blazing in her eyes. I know you hated Christen, but Tim is innocent. He's a wonderful boy. Nausea rose in my throat. You think I can just adopt him after all this? Dolores's jaw tightened. Yes, she said firmly, because we eliminated the vermin that sired him. Marshall is gone, and your ex-wife is gone. Linda's voice was a strained plea. We want you to take him home. Give him a real home. You're established and stable. It's what Tim needs. Spots danced at the edge of my vision. I realized I was on the verge of hyperventilating. You're both insane, I whispered. You killed 2 people. You show me this child who isn't biologically mine, and you just expect me to take him. I've made you the beneficiary of my will, Dolores said, clearing her throat. You'll have everything you need to provide for Tim. I'm only asking you to be the father he needs. I stared at the floor, trying to fight the panic radiating through my limbs. My mother came closer and placed a hand on my shoulder. I don't expect you to decide now, she murmured. But please, Martin, we did these terrible things to protect Tim. We know it will stain our souls forever, but he can grow up free from the poison they would have spread. My eyes stung, a mixture of revulsion and pity welling up. You're both murderers, I choked out. Yes, Dolores replied. We did what had to be done. The room felt suffocating. Just then, Tim reappeared in the hallway, walking toward me. He looked up with wide, curious eyes. You look scared, he said solemnly. Are you okay? For a moment, everything froze. This small, utterly innocent boy was looking at me with genuine concern. Suddenly, the weight of it all made me dizzy. The certainty that if I didn't step up, he would have no one. As monstrous as my mother and Dolores were, they were also on the brink of death. Tim's entire future was about to be thrown into chaos, and he had no idea. My voice came out as a rasp. Yeah, buddy, I said softly. I'm okay. I drove home that night in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Sleep was a stranger. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Christen's face, a Florida swamp, a monstrous reptile. If Dolores and my mother were telling the truth, they had committed unspeakable acts. Yet, the next morning, I found myself back at Dolores's house. I couldn't pretend the child didn't exist. Dolores opened the door as if she'd been expecting me. Her eyes held a universe of sadness and relief. Tim was sitting on the floor, scribbling with crayons. He looked up, recognized me, and offered a small, welcoming smile. "Hi," he said simply. I crouched down. "Hey, Tim." He held up a piece of paper with a shaky stick figure on it. "I drew a monster truck," he announced, though it could have been anything. "It's really good," I managed, forcing my lips into a weak smile. Dolores cleared her throat. "You can take him," she said, her voice stiff with grief. "He deserves a parent who will care for him, not me, not Linda. We'll be gone soon." My mother emerged from another room, looking just as frail. Her eyes were red from tears or exhaustion. She reached out to touch my arm. "Son, I know this is insane, but Tim is a lovely child." She paused, her gaze drifting to him. "We did this for him and for you. To keep your name out of the filth they would have dragged it through." A wave of grief, anger, and confusion hit me. "You don't realize how monstrous what you've done is," I whispered. Dolores gave a weary shrug. "We do, but Christen was unhinged. She was going to spread lies about you, a man who had no part in this child's conception. She was teaching Tim to hate you for abandonment, as if you'd deserted your own son. We had to protect his innocence." Tim looked up, curious. "Are you sad?" he asked in that guileless voice. I found myself forcing a shaky smile. "Maybe just a little," I replied, "but it's going to be okay." And looking into his wide, clear eyes, something inside me broke. I had never wanted a child, not after the heartbreak with Christen. But I couldn't abandon him, either. It wasn't his fault who his mother or father were, or what had become of them. "Tim," I said softly, "would you like to come live with me?" His brow furrowed in childish confusion. "Will Grandma Dolores come too?" Dolores shot me a sharp look, but her eyes were sad. "I'm sick, Tim. I can't stay with you for very long." "Grandma Linda?" he asked. My mother forced a small smile. "I'm sick too, sweetie." She took a breath, guiding Tim's eyes to mine. "But Martin, he's a good man. He'll take care of you." Tim fidgeted with his crayons, absorbing this. Then, with the resilience of a child, he chirped, "Okay," and nodded. I almost laughed at the simplicity of it. Dolores swallowed hard. "I'm signing custody over to you," she said quietly, "making you Tim's legal guardian. He deserves a father." "It's final then?" I asked, my voice hollow. She nodded. "We won't be around much longer, Martin. As we said, we're both stage 4. Our days are numbered." My mother walked over to Tim, ruffled his hair, then looked at me, her eyes wet. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, "for stepping up." I stood rigid. "I'm not doing this for your pride," I said flatly. "I'm doing it for him." Linda nodded, grief and a flicker of regret for the path that led here shining in her gaze. Over the next few weeks, the paperwork was handled discreetly. Dolores, with the resources at her disposal, greased whatever wheels needed greasing. Soon, Tim was legally in my guardianship, and as promised, Dolores transferred assets into my name so I wouldn't be financially burdened. I found a new house, a modest place with a small yard, something more suitable for raising a child. And just like that, my life shifted from a solitary routine to fatherhood. My mother and Dolores passed away within 2 months of each other. Peacefully, I was told, at least in medical terms. I visited them on their deathbeds, though what I felt was complicated. There was no easy heartbreak, no neat forgiveness. I simply nodded as they whispered their final apologies. Linda told me she loved me. Dolores reminded me to take care of our boy. I promised I would. For all the horror of their confession, they left this world certain they had saved Tim from a worse fate. In the beginning, Tim asked simple questions about where his grandmothers went or why he couldn't see Christen. I struggled for half-truths, telling him gently that his mother had passed away, and so had his grandmothers. It was all a boy his age needed to know. For the next 2 years, we settled into a decent life. I went to therapy to cope, addressing the psychological scars of everything I'd endured. Tim thrived in daycare, then kindergarten, absorbing knowledge, laughing at cartoons, and hugging me every night as if I were truly his father. I tried to date, but it was never easy. The burden I carried was immense. The ghosts of Christen, of betrayal, of the horrific secrets behind her disappearance weighed heavily on me, but I managed to keep that darkness away from Tim. Then life threw me another curveball. 4 years after I adopted Tim, I met Kelly. We connected in a way I hadn't felt since I first fell for Christen, only better because Kelly was honest. She was a nurse, a former Marine, just as my mother had been. She had a gentle strength, a directness I found disarming. She and Tim bonded instantly. I'd find them coloring together or lost in children's books. The first time Tim called her Mama Kelly, I froze, unsure if it was too soon. But Kelly just smiled, her eyes welling with tears. 6 months later, I asked her to marry me. She said yes. The wedding was small and simple. Tim was our ring bearer, beaming in a tiny tuxedo. I wondered if my mother and Dolores were watching from somewhere, seeing the outcome of their twisted, well-intentioned plan. A year later, Kelly and I had a daughter. Tim was ecstatic to be a big brother. He would stand guard by her crib, promising to protect her. His sincerity broke my heart with both pride and guilt because I knew how many people had died for him to have this seemingly normal life. I rarely thought of Christen anymore. The few nightmares about the Florida swamp had finally faded. As for Marshall, I never spoke his name, nor mentioned him to Tim. What good would it do? One afternoon, after Tim's 8th birthday, I found myself digging through an old trunk of my mother's things in the attic. Kelly was outside mowing the lawn. Tim was playing with the baby. Inside the trunk, I found a small, leather-bound journal, its edges worn. With no intention of prying, but every right to sift through my late mother's effects, I opened it. My eyes were met with entries from decades ago, likely just after I was born. Then I found a photograph tucked between the pages. It showed two women in uniform, my mother and Dolores, standing side by side, their faces grim, near a sign for the George Bush Center for Intelligence. The back was dated 1999. My mind reeled. My mother had never told me she was in the CIA. She'd said she was in the Marines, yes, but not intelligence. And there was a short line scrawled on the next page of the journal. Asterisk. We took an oath We keep each other's secrets, protect our own from all threats, no matter the cost. I sank onto an old stool, running a hand over my face, my breath shaky. The pieces of a puzzle I never knew I was solving clicked into place. My mother and Dolores' unbreakable bond, their sudden ability to handle affairs with ruthless efficiency, the ease with which they had ended 2 lives and covered it up. Yet, even as a chill ran down my spine, I realized that Tim's stability, that bright spark in his eyes, was the direct result of their final act. Morally repugnant, yes, but with a monstrous determination. They had surgically removed the toxic influences from his life. A strange sense of peace settled over me. They had done the unthinkable in the name of love, however twisted. I carefully placed the photo back in the journal, slid the journal back into the trunk, and locked it. I took a moment to steady my breathing. The sounds of my daughter crying, of Tim's gentle shushing, of Kelly's exasperated laugh, and the hum of our precious little family drifted up from downstairs. I closed my eyes, letting the swirl of guilt and gratitude merge into a single breath. Semper Fi, I whispered, remembering a phrase I'd once overheard them exchange in passing. Always faithful. In their own brutal fashion, they had remained loyal, to me, to Tim, and to an oath that no threat could ever break. I descended to rejoin my family, determined to move forward with what little we had left, with this improbable happiness. The past was a haunting mosaic of betrayal and violence. Yet from that wreckage, Tim and I had built something good, and that, I decided, is where my focus would remain.